Nightmare mother-in-law tried to pressure me into letting my wife get impregnated by another man, so I socked him in the face and walked out. My wife Elena was 27 years old at the time. She had an older sister named Adriana who was married to a guy named Ariel. My wife's mother, Valentina, never accepted me. She tried to make many excuses to separate us, even going as far as saying you can't marry an N-word. She really discriminated against me and humiliated me every chance she got. She always said that Elena deserved something better. The thing is, I thought my life was perfect. Elena was incredibly beautiful, the most stunning woman I had ever met. At that time, my salary as a mechanical engineer was decent. We had agreed not to have children soon. First, we wanted to travel to some countries and finish paying for a house. A year after we got married, Elena's mother suffered a fall that left her hospitalized for a couple of days. The doctors reported that it was nothing serious, but they recommended bed rest. Elena was distraught about her mother and stayed with her. Time passed, and during the 30th wedding anniversary party of Elena's parents, two shocking announcements were made. My wife's older sister Adriana had been struggling for 5 long years to have children, visiting fertility clinics without success. It was a heartbreaking situation for her, to suffer in silence that inability. Valentina's confession was the second shocking announcement. With a trembling voice and tears in her eyes, she expressed that she longed to become a grandmother. Her words, full of a sense of urgency, resonated deeply. A fall could be the end of me, and who knows when it could happen. I watched as Elena broke down emotionally upon hearing her mother's words. Upon returning home, my wife was noticeably affected by the weight of what had happened. I chose to ignore the situation, a mistake of mine that I did not want to face. The months passed without further news, until I received an urgent call from Elena. Her voice reflected anguish as she explained that she was in the hospital. I was alarmed. "Are you okay?" I asked with fear. She replied that she was, but that she was there because Adriana had attempted suicide. Adriana's inability to have children had plunged her into a deep depression, and Valentina's words, with her longing to be a grandmother, had been the trigger. Despair led her to try to end her life. As soon as I got off work, I rushed to the hospital to support my wife. I found Valentina there, her gaze cold and somewhat accusatory. Adriana's husband Ariel, Julio, Valentina's husband, and my wife were also there. I tried to understand the situation, and to some extent, Valentina blamed me for Adriana's suicide attempt. According to her, her desire to be a grandmother and Adriana's inability to give her a grandchild had led her to try to take her own life. The doctors released Adriana from the hospital 2 days later and prescribed her antidepressants. That same day, we had a family meeting where we revisited the topic of grandchildren for Adriana's infertility. I proposed the idea of adoption as a viable alternative. Both Adriana and Ariel could adopt without any difficulty, as they were adults with good incomes. There was an uncomfortable silence in the room. Valentina looked at me firmly and rejected the idea, arguing that adopting a child was not the same as having a grandchild of their own blood. The conversation did not progress and we returned home with a tense atmosphere. The weeks after that meeting became strange. Adriana and Ariel started visiting my house more often. I often heard them talking, but when they entered, they kept quiet. On the other hand, Elena's behavior changed. She became more reserved with her phone and distant with me. When I came home and tried to get close to her, she would pull away. In addition, our intimate life decreased. On July 5th, a day that I remember clearly, I came home from work and saw several cars parked in front of my house. I feared the worst. When I entered, I found my in-laws, my sister-in-law with her husband, and my wife in the living room. Their expressions indicated seriousness. Elena told me, "Sit down, we need to talk." I nodded and sat down. I tried to ask what was happening, but my mother-in-law interrupted me by asking, "What solution can you give us?" I remained silent. I did not understand what she was referring to. Then, she added, "About my grandchildren." I tried to suggest in vitro fertilization, explaining how it worked, but I only found the disgust on Valentina's face. In her old woman's expression, I noticed that she rejected my proposal and said, "I have another solution." As I said that, I looked at Elena, confused, but she didn't look back at me. Instead, she looked at her sister and then her mother. I saw Adriana smiling, while Adriana's husband Ariel showed a haughty attitude. His smile turned mocking, looking at me with superiority. I kept silent and waited for Elena to say something, but she didn't speak, prolonging the silence. Suddenly, Elena shouted at me, "Idiot, say something." I didn't understand and kept silent. Then, my mother-in-law tried to calm Elena down, speaking with a certain elegance. "As you know, dear, Adriana has been cursed with the impossibility of giving us grandchildren, that joy of motherhood that she cannot experience." Elena interrupted and explained that they had analyzed options, mentioning the risks of surrogacy, the possible genetic and hereditary problems that could arise generations later. Then, Ariel added that surrogacy was expensive and that they could not afford it, in addition to the expenses that the baby would require. "So, what do you propose?" I asked. My mother-in-law's evil answer left me speechless. "Since you refuse to have children, Elena will become pregnant with Ariel." I swallowed hard, unable to utter a word, hoping it was a joke. However, my mother-in-law continued speaking. "We understand that you don't want to take care of the baby. Don't worry, when it is born, we will register it in the name of Adriana and Ariel." Then she mentioned, "Children are not products, they are not made in a laboratory, they must be conceived with love, the fruit of a couple." She explained a series of religious arguments, citing the church's prohibition and her desire to prevent her grandchild from being condemned to hell. Before my mother-in-law could continue, I stood up abruptly and shouted, "No way, I don't usually raise my voice, but I did on this occasion." "Elena, what do you want to tell me?" I asked my wife. I saw her expression change between confusion and fear. My mother-in-law looked at me defiantly, trying to explain to me, apparently thinking that I would not react this way. Ariel approached me, trying to put his hand on my shoulder, and I said, "Don't touch me." I was really upset. My mother-in-law insisted that she wanted a grandchild. It was then that I added, "Fine, I'll give her a grandchild. We'll try to conceive next week." My mother-in-law intervened again. "We respect your decision not to have children yet. I understand that you are young and still have the urge to explore. Therefore, Ariel will be the one to take care of it. Adriana agrees that her son be conceived in the act of love. Therefore, it will be between Elena and Ariel." At these words, I shouted again, "You're crazy, old witch." Everyone was surprised at my response. My mother-in-law shed crocodile tears. Julio approached her, and so did Adriana. Elena looked at me and shouted at me, asking me how I could say that. Ariel approached me and I remember he said to me, "Come on, it will be fun." At that moment, I landed a punch so hard on Ariel's face that he fell to the ground. Adriana screamed. Elena too. I shouted at them to leave my house and left, locking myself in the bedroom. I could hear some shouts and saw them leaving home through the window. Minutes later, Elena entered quite upset, complaining to me for having offended her mother. She ignored the simple fact that they were trying to convince me that my wife have intimacy with another man. Elena did not speak to me all day. When I woke up, I found her in the kitchen. She looked like she had been crying. She called me immature for not understanding the situation, mentioned that my mother-in-law was in critical condition. I decided to ignore her and did not take her to the hospital. The worst was yet to come, however.